Ethan woke up with a start, the faint sound of shifting metal echoing in the ruined shelter. For a moment, his soldier's instincts told him to reach for his sidearm. But then he remembered who shared the space with him. The alien queen was awake, sitting against the far wall, her glowing eyes fixed on him with a mixture of suspicion and something else he couldn't quite name. She had not tried to run during the night. She had not tried to attack either. Instead, she simply stared, as if she were waiting for him to show his true nature. He rubbed his tired eyes and stretched. The air was still thick with dust from the burned battlefield outside. The ground shook every now and then, a reminder that the war wasn't over, only paused. Ethan glanced at her. She was proud even in weakness, her silver armor broken, her skin marked by burns and cuts. Any other soldier would have left her to die or finished her off without hesitation. She was their enemy queen, the warrior who led countless raids against humans. But Ethan couldn't bring himself to do it. There was something in her gaze. Something that reminded him that even a queen was flesh and blood. "You didn't sleep," he said quietly, pulling out his ration kit. His voice echoed softly in the hollow building. "I do not need your concern," she answered, her tone sharp but her words slower than the day before. Her wounds made even speaking an effort. She still looked at him with mistrust, as if trying to uncover the reason behind his actions. "Why did you not leave me? I would have left you." Ethan shrugged and tore open a package. "Maybe, but I'm not you." He held out the food. She did not move. "It's not poisoned. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't be sitting there talking." Her eyes narrowed, and for a long moment she seemed to consider lunging at him, maybe to test whether he truly lowered his guard, but her body betrayed her. She was too weak. Her pride kept her silent, yet her hunger made her hand finally move. Slowly, with visible effort, she reached for the food and tasted it. She chewed, without showing any sign of pleasure or thanks. But Ethan noticed the way her rigid shoulders eased slightly after the first bite. They sat in silence as she ate. Outside, the sky rumbled with the sound of distant explosions. Ethan kept his eyes on the entrance, his weapon ready. But in his peripheral vision, he watched her. She was supposed to be his enemy, a living symbol of everything his unit had fought against. Yet here she was, sharing his rations, breathing the same stale air, sitting close enough that he could see the flicker of life slowly returning to her face. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her armored hand. "Humans are strange," she muttered, almost to herself. "My enemies should strike me down. Instead, you feed me like one of your kind. You're alive," Ethan said simply. "That's enough reason." She tilted her head, her sharp features unreadable. "Alive, yes. Among my people, weakness invites death. A leader who cannot stand should be abandoned. That is the way of the Valkyrian yet. You," she stopped, as though speaking more would reveal too much of her own thoughts. Ethan leaned back against the wall, adjusting the rifle resting across his knees. Maybe that's why this war never ends. Both sides think mercy is weakness. Both sides keep fighting until nothing is left. Her eyes hardened again, though there was hesitation in them. "Mercy is weakness," she insisted. "That is what I was taught since I was born." "Then maybe what you were taught is wrong," Ethan replied. The words hung in the air, bold and dangerous. She didn't answer right away. Her pride as queen demanded she argue, but some part of her, tired, wounded, and strangely curious, kept her silent. Instead, she studied him the way she might study an unfamiliar weapon, searching for flaws. Time passed slowly in the ruined shelter. Ethan left briefly to gather water from a cracked pipeline nearby, it always returning to find her waiting exactly where he had left her, her posture stiff, her gaze sharp. He treated her wounds again, wrapping fresh bandages around her injured arm. She didn't thank him, but she didn't stop him either. At one point she asked, "Do you not fear me?" Ethan gave a small smile. "Should I?" "You should," she said with a low growl. "I have slain hundreds of your kind. My name alone carries terror, yet you speak as if I am nothing more than another soldier. You're injured. You're Stranded right now, you're just someone who needs help. That's what I see, he replied. Her chest rose and fell and she turned her head away, unable to respond. For the first time in her life, the queen felt a strange unease, not because of threat or pain, but because of confusion. She couldn't fit this human into the world she understood. He should hate her, he should fear her, he should either kill her or run. Instead, he stayed, feeding her, tending her wounds, talking to her as though she were not a queen, not an enemy, but simply someone. That night, when Ethan settled down again, the queen did not keep silent. Her voice was softer, more curious. Tell me, human, why did you join this war? Ethan blinked at the unexpected question. He thought about it for a moment before answering. I didn't join because I wanted to fight. I joined because I had to. My home was attacked. People I cared about were killed. I thought fighting would keep others safe. And yet you helped me, she whispered, the one who ordered such attacks. Maybe, he said, staring at the cracked ceiling. But I don't believe saving you now will make those losses worse. Maybe it'll make things better, even if just a little. The queen's eyes glimmered faintly in the dim light. She did not understand. She had been raised to believe every enemy was nothing but a target to crush, every weakness an opening to exploit. Yet this human seemed to see the world differently, and she found herself listening to him instead of dismissing him. For the first time, doubt crept into her warrior heart. Doubt about the path of endless battle, doubt about herself. She turned away and said nothing more, but Ethan noticed that when she closed her eyes, her expression was no longer hardened like stone. It was troubled, conflicted, almost human in its vulnerability. As the night stretched on, Ethan stayed awake, keeping watch. The war was still out there, and danger could come at any moment. Yet his mind kept returning to the woman across from him, the warrior queen who had once been a monster in his eyes, now sitting silent, fragile, and full of questions she had never asked before. He wondered what would happen when she recovered. Would she return to her people and lead them back to war? Or would she betray him the moment she had the strength? Or was something changing between them, something neither of them could fully see yet? When the first light of dawn crept through the broken walls, Ethan found himself hoping that the queen's doubt might one day grow into something more, something that could end the war, something that could prove that kindness, even in the darkest places, was never wasted. And though she would never admit it out loud, the queen also felt something she had never known before: uncertainty. She had been taught to trust only power, to live only for battle, to crush weakness wherever it appeared. But now, staring at the human who treated her with patience instead of cruelty, she could not help but wonder if strength could mean something else. She hated that thought. She hated that it came from him, and yet deep inside, she could not ignore it. The warrior queen of the Valkyrians closed her eyes once more, and for the first time in years, her dreams were not filled with conquest. They were filled with questions. Days passed, and the ruined shelter became a strange place of uneasy trust. Ethan maintained his careful routines, gathering water, foraging for supplies, and keeping a wary eye on the world outside. Every night, he slept lightly, prepared for the possibility that enemies would find them. Yet each time he returned from a short scouting run, he would find the queen waiting quietly, sitting among the debris, her sharp eyes observing, but less tense than before. The queen had begun speaking. More, though still cautiously. She asked about human life, their families, their wars, and their small acts of kindness, trying to understand why someone who had every reason to hate her could act with patience and mercy. Ethan answered honestly, never embellishing, never patronizing. She was shocked to hear him speak of forgiveness, of choosing to help instead of harm. And she found herself struggling to reconcile these ideas with everything she had learned in her life as a Valkyrian leader. One afternoon, while Ethan was repairing a cracked pipe to gather water, the queen attempted to lift a small fragment of rubble. She grimaced and dropped it. Ethan turned to see her, concern flashing across his face. "You're pushing yourself too hard." "Me handle that. I am not weak," she said. though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "You're recovering," he said simply. "That's not weakness. That's smart." She stared at him, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. For the first time in a long time, someone acknowledged her strength without expecting her to fight or kill to prove it. She began to notice small details about him: his patience, his calm demeanor, the way he acted as if her life mattered simply because it existed. It was strange, almost impossible, and yet compelling. Over the next several days, their conversations grew longer. She asked about human culture, the strange foods he carried, and the strange rituals of soldiers. Ethan told her about small joys, simple games, music, and stories of families reunited after battle. He did not try to teach her, nor did he lecture. He only shared. Slowly, she began to smile at some of his stories, though she did so reluctantly. Evening, as the sun cast a soft red glow through the shattered walls, she spoke quietly. "I have never seen a human act like this. Never. Even those who surrender are punished or killed. You have risked everything for me, and yet you ask nothing in return. Why?" Ethan looked at her, studying her weary expression. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said. "It's not because I expect anything. Not because I want power or glory. Sometimes saving someone is the only right choice." Her eyes widened slightly. The words were simple, but in them she heard a truth she had never considered. A strength not born from weapons or conquest, but from patience, mercy, and the courage to act rightly despite fear. It unsettled her, and yet it drew her in. The days turned into a week, and the queen's wounds slowly healed. Ethan had fashioned a crude bed for her using broken panels and soft cloths he scavenged. She refused to lie down at first, preferring to remain seated, stiff and proud. But one night, after Ethan insisted gently, she allowed herself to rest fully. In her dreams, she saw strange visions, not of battle, not of conquest, but of faces she had never known, of worlds beyond her own, and of humans acting with courage in ways she could scarcely imagine. During one particularly quiet afternoon, Ethan found her inspecting his pack of rations. "You eat differently," she observed. "You do not consume until you are forced. You ration, you plan, you do not waste." "It helps you survive longer," he said. She tilted her head, considering the words. "And yet you still share everything." "With me, yes," he said, "because survival isn't just about me. It's about those around me, too." She pondered that in silence, and for the first time, a new feeling crept into her heart. A feeling she had never known. Respect not just for him as a soldier, but for the idea he represented. A human could be strong without killing. A human could be powerful without cruelty. A human could show mercy without weakness. Later that day, Ethan noticed her pacing near the entrance of the shelter, her armor battered but polished with care. "You think too much," he said softly. "I must think." She replied, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed a swirl of confusion. "I am the queen. My decisions shape the lives of thousands. How can I think of kindness when my entire life has been about war?" "You can start small," Ethan said. "Start with today. Start with what you can change here. Don't worry about the rest of the universe right now." She looked at him, her face a mixture of frustration and admiration. For the first time, she wondered if humans truly were as weak as her people believed, or if they possessed a quiet power that surpassed even the mightiest Valkyrian warrior. She had always measured strength by fear and bloodshed, but this man had shown her another measure that demanded courage in a different way. Days turned into weeks. Ethan taught her to eat more gently, to rest more fully, and to trust him a little more each day. In return, she began teaching him small things about Valkyrian combatant to prepare him for battle, but so he could understand her people better. She demonstrated techniques with caution, careful not to exert herself beyond her healing wounds. Ethan watched, learning not just the movements, but the discipline and precision behind them. One evening, a faint sound of approaching vehicles reached them. Ethan stiffened and gestured for silence. The queen, alert, crouched beside him. Free. The first time, they moved together, not as enemy and prey, but as two beings watching the same danger. The vehicles passed without incident, and she exhaled sharply, her first sign of relief in days. "You are patient," she said, her voice low. "I expected fear, I expected panic, but you remain calm." "It's part of survival," Ethan said. "Panicking doesn't help anyone." The Queen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I see now that your humankind, has a different kind of strength. One I have never known." They sat in silence as the sun disappeared behind the horizon. The Queen felt a warmth she could not name, a sense of companionship without obligation, a connection without battle. She realized that this man, this human, had done something impossible. He had changed the way she viewed the world. She no longer saw humans solely as enemies. She saw them as creatures capable of courage, patience, and mercy, the very qualities she had always believed were weaknesses. That night, as Ethan slept lightly nearby, the Queen stood and looked at the stars through the broken roof. She remembered every battle she had fought, every life she had taken, and yet for the first time she questioned her own methods. Could strength truly exist without violence? Could mercy be as powerful as a weapon? She touched the bandages on her arms, feeling the slowly healing flesh beneath. She thought of Ethan, the way he had risked his own safety to care for her, the way he had spoken without anger or judgment, the way he had offered simple kindness without expecting anything in return. A quiet feeling stirred inside her, one she did not recognize and could not name. Was it trust? Was it respect? Perhaps it was something deeper, something that Valkyrians did not have words for. She did not know, and she did not yet need to. But she knew one thing she could not ignore it. Over the next few days, their bond deepened further. The Queen began to share fragments of her past, stories of victories and defeats, of comrades lost and battles won. Ethan listened without judgment, offering empathy without pity. She began to see that humans could carry burdens without being crushed by them, that their hearts could remain open even after suffering, and slowly, without realizing it, she began to smile more often. Small smiles, fleeting and reluctant, but smiles nonetheless. A Valkyrian queen, warrior of countless campaigns, had found herself drawn to the human soldier not as an enemy, but as a companion, a guide, and perhaps the first friend she had ever known who was not bound by fear or conquest. As the nights grew colder, Ethan built a small fire in the shelter. The Queen sat near it, her armor removed except for her breastplate, the glow of the flames reflecting in her eyes. She did not speak, merely watched him move with careful precision, tending the fire and preparing simple meals. And in her silence she felt a growing warmth, one that had nothing to do with the flames. For the first time in her life, she considered that perhaps survival was not only about strength and victory. Perhaps survival also required trust, patience, and the courage to accept help when offered. And in that thought, she realized something she had never imagined possible. She was beginning to respect a human, and in doing so, she had begun to respect herself in a way that had nothing to do with battle. The bond between the soldier and the Queen grew quietly, steadily, like roots taking hold in a harsh soil. Each act of care, each shared word, each moment of trust planted seeds that neither of them could yet fully understand. But the Queen knew one thing with certainty: the world she had known was changing, and she could not turn back. And for Ethan, the weeks of careful tending, of vigilance and patience, had created something more profound than he could have imagined. He had found in the Queen not a foe, but a mind as sharp as his own, a warrior bound by honor, and a being capable of seeing the world in ways humans often overlooked. Together, the quiet of the ruined shelter, the two of them discovered something unexpected, the possibility of understanding, of companionship, of a new kind of strength that neither war nor bloodshed could. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the faint scent of smoke and burnt earth from the battlefield beyond. Ethan stood at the entrance of the ruined shelter, scanning the horizon with cautious eyes. He had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of survival with the Queen, but today felt different. Something in the air whispered change. an unspoken warning that their fragile peace could be shattered at any moment. The queen emerged from the shadows behind him, her movements careful and deliberate. She was fully recovered now, her wounds healed and her strength returning. Yet she moved differently than she had before, less bound by pride alone. Her eyes, once sharp with suspicion, now held a spark of something unfamiliar, something human. Trust, though she would never admit it aloud, had begun to root in her heart. Ethan turned to her, noting the tension in her stance. "What is it?" he asked gently. "They are coming," she said simply, her voice low but steady. "Valkyrian scouts. They have found traces of my presence." Ethan nodded, already moving to gather supplies. "Then we prepare. We move only if necessary, and we defend if we must." The queen studied him for a long moment. In the past, she would have considered such a stance weak, defensive, hesitant, unworthy of a leader. Yet she saw in him a different kind of strength, one that did not rely on fear, on brute force, or on dominance. This human had survived countless dangers without giving in to panic, without succumbing to hatred, and without taking unnecessary lives. As the distant sounds of vengeance grew louder, the queen made her first decision. She would not return to her people, not yet. Not without considering what she had learned from Ethan. She had always believed that loyalty to the Valkyrians demanded obedience, submission, and a willingness to kill without question. But the human had shown her another path, one of mercy, patience, and courage. The scouts appeared on the horizon, small figures moving with precision and purpose. Ethan crouched behind the remnants of a collapsed wall, signaling for the queen to stay close. Her armor gleamed in the sunlight, a reminder of her warrior heritage, but her movements were deliberate, controlled, and guided by his calm instructions. Together, they became a single unit, moving with quiet efficiency. When the scouts reached the ruins, they expected an easy capture. They did not anticipate a Valkyrian queen standing beside a human soldier, her stance firm, her eyes blazing with authority. Ethan's heart beat faster, but he did not falter. He trusted her, and she had learned to trust him. The first scout stepped forward, a weapon raised. The queen's voice rang out, commanding and clear. "Stop." The scout froze, confused. The other scouts paused as well, unsure of what to do. They had been trained to obey the Valkyrian hierarchy. But seeing their queen aligned with a human shattered everything they had been taught. "You are not here to capture me," the queen continued, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You are here to witness a new way. Humans are not weak. Humans are not enemies to be destroyed. They are capable of strength beyond your understanding, strength of mercy, courage, and choice." The scouts looked at each other, hesitation flickering in their eyes. Ethan stepped forward slowly, hands visible, showing he meant no harm. "We do not need to fight," he said calmly. "We can survive without bloodshed." The queen turned her gaze back to him, her expression unreadable. Then, in a move that shocked everyone, she stepped fully beside him, her posture strong, her presence undeniable. "I choose to stand with him," she declared, her voice carrying over the battlefield, not as a captive, not as a foe, but as one who recognizes the value of life beyond conquest. "Today, mercy is our weapon, and understanding is our shield." Scouts faltered. Some lowered their weapons, uncertain of their orders. Others whispered among themselves, unable to reconcile their training with the reality before them. The queen's choice had created a ripple of doubt, crack in the armor of unquestioning obedience. Ethan watched her, awe and respect mingling in his chest. The warrior who had once been his enemy now stood beside him as an ally, not out of fear, but out of recognition of something greater than either of them had ever known. Together, they faced the approaching forces, not as conqueror and captive, but as equals bound by trust and shared purpose. Hours passed, and the scouts eventually withdrew, unsure of how to proceed against a queen who had defied tradition and a human who refused to fight. Ethan and the queen remained vigilant, but a sense of calm settled over them. The battle had not been won through violence, but through courage, the courage to act differently, to show mercy, and to trust one another. That night, as they sat near a small fire, the queen spoke softly, almost to herself. I never believed such strength existed. Among my people, power is measured by fear, by domination. But you have shown me another way. Ethan looked at her, a small smile on his face. Strength is more than weapons in war. It's the choices we make, the lives we protect, the courage to be kind even when it's hard. Her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. I did not expect to feel this. To trust, to question, to see a world beyond the one I knew. And yet here I am. You're not alone, Ethan said. Not anymore. The queen looked at him, and for the first time her armor felt like more than just metal. It was a symbol of her choice, her recognition that strength could coexist with mercy. She had learned that humans were capable of extraordinary things, not just survival, not just cunning, but compassion and understanding. And she had experienced it firsthand as the stars appeared above. The queen allowed herself to relax in a way she never had before. The war had not ended, but a new path had begun. She had chosen to stand with the human who had treated her kindly, and in doing so, she had discovered a power far greater than any she had wielded on the battlefield. The bond between them was no longer tentative or uncertain. It was solid, formed through shared danger, mutual respect, and acts of courage that transcended species. The queen knew that her decision would be questioned by her people, that she might face betrayal or scorn, yet she did not waver. Seeing what true strength could be, and she would carry that knowledge forward, in the quiet of the ruined shelter. Surrounded by the remnants of war, Ethan and the queen sat side by side. Their silence was comfortable, filled with understanding rather than tension. For the first time, the queen did not feel the need to assert her dominance or hide her vulnerability. She had discovered something unexpected, human's kindness, and the courage it inspired within her. As dawn approached, the queen rose and looked at the horizon. The world may not understand us, she said softly, but I do. That is enough. Ethan nodded. We will face it together, he replied. And so, in a universe torn by war, a human and a Valkyrian queen forged an alliance that defied expectation. The queen had given an unexpected reaction to the simple act of kindness, and in doing so had changed not only her own path, but perhaps the future of both their peoples. Strength, she realized, was not only measured by victory or conquest, it was measured by courage, mercy, and the choice to stand together against a world that demanded division. As they prepared to leave the ruined shelter and face the unknown, neither knew what challenges lay ahead, but they knew one truth that would guide them: the power of kindness. The strength of trust and the bond forged between two unlikely allies would shape their destiny in ways neither could have imagined. And for the first time in her life, Queen smiled, not the faint reluctant smiles of doubt, but a full, genuine expression of understanding, respect, and hope. She had chosen a human, and in doing so, she had discovered the extraordinary potential of humanity. The war might rage on, the universe might remain cruel, but in that moment, the queen and the human soldier stood together, united by a simple truth. Compassion could be the strongest weapon of all, and the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of history. The war was over, but its shadow still clung to every corner of the galaxy. Burned ships drifted like silent graves in orbit, planets carried scars that would take centuries to heal, and survivors whispered about the cruelty that had passed. Among those survivors was the Queen of the Veyar, a once mighty race that had nearly been destroyed in the conflict. Her name was Lyra, and though she lived, she was not the same. Her palace, once filled with music, now felt more like a tomb. Tall crystal walls reflected empty corridors, and the throne stood cold and untouched. The queen herself kept to her chambers, refusing to meet even the kindest of her people. Whenever a hand reached out, she recoiled as though it carried fire. The war had not only torn her empire apart, it had broken something inside her. She could no longer bear the closeness of another, not even the gentle touch of her healers. The council of her people despaired. She must recover, they whispered, among themselves. A queen cannot rule from shadows. If she hides from us, the empire will collapse. But none of them dared to push her. Each time they tried, she flinched, retreating further into silence. Her fear had become a barrier higher than any fortress wall. It was in this fragile state that humans arrived. They came not as conquerors, but as mediators, offering to help stabilize the broken sectors of the galaxy. Some of the Veyari distrusted them, remembering that humans had fought in the war as well, sometimes against them. Others believed humans were too young and reckless to understand the ancient traditions of their people. Yet the council allowed a small human force to stay, arguing that neutrality might keep rival factions from tearing the empire apart. Among the soldiers was a young man named Daniel Hayes. He was not a decorated officer, nor the most skilled fighter among his unit. He was simply steady, reliable, and unshaken by the grim sights that others avoided. His commanders often said he had the patience of stone, a rare quality in the chaos of post-war service. Daniel did not expect to meet the Queen. He assumed his role would be guarding supply lines or patrolling ruined streets. But fate often has strange plans. One quiet evening, as the twin moons of Veyara hung low in the sky, Daniel was ordered to escort a group of counselors through the palace. They wished to present reports to the Queen, though none of them believed she would accept their presence. The corridors were silent, except for the sound of their footsteps. They were led through shimmering halls until they reached the chamber where Lyra sometimes appeared. Daniel had heard rumors of her. They said she was beautiful once, but now her face carried scars from fire and blade. They said her eyes once, bright like starlight, had grown dim. Some even claimed she was cursed, touched by something beyond human understanding. He did not know which to believe, but he felt a weight settle in his chest when the chamber doors opened. The Queen stood by the window, her long silver hair falling around her shoulders, her gown flowing like water. She did not sit on her throne. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on the night sky, as though searching for something far beyond the stars. When the counselors approached, she turned her head slightly. The movement was graceful, yet Daniel noticed the faint tremor in her hands. The counselors bowed deeply and began their careful words. They spoke of rebuilding, of allies, of food shortages.
Wow.
Their voices echoed softly in the crystal chamber, but the Queen did not answer. When one of them dared to step closer, she flinched, pulling back as though his presence alone wounded her. The counselor froze, his face pale, and retreated without another word. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Daniel stood at the edge of the chamber, silent as he had been trained. He watched her, but not with fear or awe. Instead, he saw something the counselors seemed blind to. She was not only a queen, she was a person, one who carried too much pain. When the meeting ended without a single word from her, the counselors left in frustration. Daniel followed, but as fate would have it, he lingered a step too long. His boot caught the edge of a loose stone, and before he could steady himself, he stumbled forward. Instinct made him reach out, and his hand brushed against the Queen's arm. The moment should have ended in disaster. Everyone knew the Queen could not bear touch, yet instead of recoiling, she froze. Her wide eyes lifted to his, and for a breathless second, she did not move away. Daniel's hand rested lightly on her arm, steadying both of them. Then, realizing what he had done, he quickly pulled back. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," he said, bowing his head. It was an accident. He expected her to scream, to order guards to drag him away, to shatter the fragile peace humans had built with her people. But none of that happened. Instead, Lyra's gaze lingered on him, confusion flickering across her scarred face. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. Finally, she turned back to the window, silent once more. Daniel left the chamber with his heart pounding. The counselors had not seen what happened, but he knew something had shifted. He could still feel the memory of her skin beneath his fingers, not cold or distant, but alive. That night, he thought of her, not as a queen, not as a figure of fear, but as someone who had stood still under his touch when she had flinched from all others. He wondered why. The next days passed slowly. Daniel returned to his duties, but whispers spread among the palace. Staff. Some claimed the queen had allowed a human near her. Others dismissed it as nonsense. Yet when the council called for another meeting, Daniel was again assigned to the escort detail. This time, as the chamber doors opened, Lyra's eyes fell on him at once. The counselor spoke again, their words heavy with worry, but she listened. In silence, when one reached forward with a gesture of concern, she recoiled sharply. Yet when Daniel shifted slightly, adjusting his stance at the edge of the room, her gaze followed him, steady and unafraid. After the meeting, when the counselors filed out, she spoke. Her voice was soft, strained from disuse, but clear. Stay. Daniel froze. He looked to the other guards, but they had already left with the counselors. Only he remained. Slowly he turned back to her, uncertain. The queen studied him with eyes that held both suspicion and something else, something fragile. She stepped closer, and though her movements were hesitant, she did not draw back. You touched me, she said quietly. Daniel lowered his head. Yes, Majesty. It was unintentional. I meant no, yet I did not withdraw, she interrupted. Her hand lifted slightly, trembling, but she let it fall before it reached him. Why? He did not know what to say. Finally, he answered with honesty. I don't know. Maybe. Because I don't see you as a queen, but as someone who deserves kindness. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, to his surprise, her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile so fleeting it could have been imagined. She turned away, but her voice carried clearly. You may return tomorrow. Daniel bowed, his chest tightening with something. He could not name. As he left, he realized that something rare had just begun. The queen, who flinched from all others, had asked for his presence again, and in that fragile beginning, a bond was born, one that would change not only their lives, but perhaps the fate of an empire. The next day, Daniel returned to the queen's chamber. His steps were steady, but his thoughts were not. He wondered why she had asked for him. Soldiers like him were rarely noticed, and even less often invited into the presence of rulers. Yet, the memory of her voice, quiet but firm, stayed with him. You may return tomorrow. Those words had echoed through his mind all night. When the guards at the chamber door saw him approach, they gave him questioning looks. The queen called for me, Daniel explained. At first they hesitated, but then, seeing the resolve in his eyes, they stepped aside. Inside, the chamber was filled with pale light from the high windows. The queen stood in the same place as before, near the wide view of the ruined city. Her gown shimmered faintly, but her posture carried a weight. That was hard to miss. She turned slowly when she sensed his presence, her silver hair catching the light. You came, she said. You asked me to, Daniel answered. Her eyes narrowed, studying him. She seemed to expect something: fear, hesitation, or perhaps flattery. But when she found none of those things, her expression softened, though only slightly. For a while, neither spoke. The silence stretched, but it did not feel as heavy as before. Finally, the queen moved to a chair carved from crystal. She lowered herself onto it with careful grace and gestured lightly toward the seat across from her. Sit, she said. Daniel obeyed, though his movements were cautious. He sat straight, not knowing if it was proper to relax before her. She noticed this, and after a moment she let out a breath. You do not know our customs, she said. No, Majesty, he admitted. I only know my own. Then perhaps it is better, she murmured. Our customs are filled with too many rules, too many ghosts. Daniel did not fully understand her words, but he could hear the sorrow behind them. He wanted to ask more, but he stayed quiet, sensing that she was not yet ready to open her heart. For several meetings after that day, their encounters followed a pattern. Counselors came, they spoke, and the queen listened in silence. She flinched when they drew near, as she always did, but when Daniel was present, her gaze often rested on him. Then, when the counselors left, she would keep him behind. Sometimes she asked questions about humans, how they rebuilt after war, how they kept faith in one another, how they lived without ancient traditions holding them down. Other times, she said nothing at all, only sat near him as though his presence was enough. Daniel did not try to fill the silence with needless words. He simply stayed steady and calm, and somehow that seemed to comfort her. One evening, as the last light of day colored the chamber in red and gold, she asked him something unexpected. "Do you fear me?" Daniel thought carefully. Most of the Veari seemed to carry a mix of awe and fear when they looked at her. She was their queen, scarred yet still powerful. But he remembered the tremor in her hands, the way her voice wavered at times. "No," he said finally, "I don't fear you. I see someone who has suffered. That is not something to fear." Her eyes widened slightly, as if the thought was foreign to her. For a long moment she studied him, and Daniel wondered if he had spoken too boldly. But then she lowered her gaze and whispered, "You speak as though I am not a queen." "You are," Daniel replied, "but you are also a person." That answer left her silent again, but he noticed that she no longer looked away from him as quickly. Something in her had begun to shift. Outside the chamber, however, not everyone approved. Whispers spread among the counselors and servants. They noticed that the queen allowed the human near her when she avoided everyone else. Some thought it was harmless, others thought it dangerous. One counselor, an elder named Vorin, spoke sharply during a private meeting. "Majesty, this human lingers too close. It is not proper for our people to see you favoring one outsider above your own." The queen stiffened, her usual calm cracking for a moment. "You would rather I sit in silence forever?" she asked. Coldly, Vorin bowed quickly, but his words carried a warning. "I only mean that humans do not understand us. They will twist our ways, and in time you will be isolated even from your own council." Lyra dismissed him with a wave, but when Daniel came that evening, he could see the weight of the exchange on her face. "They do not trust me," she admitted quietly. "Not even those who claim loyalty. They fear what they don't understand." Daniel said, "Humans are the same. But fear doesn't always mean hate. Sometimes it only means people need time." Her eyes met his, filled with doubt. "And if time is not enough, then you keep going," Daniel said simply. "Even if you're alone, because stopping means letting the ones who want you broken win." Those words seemed to strike something deep in her. She looked at him for a long while, then nodded faintly. The fragile trust between them grew stronger in the days that followed. Once, when Daniel handed her a cup of water, their hands brushed. She did not pull away. Instead, she held the cup, her fingers trembling only slightly, and kept her gaze on him. Another time, when she stumbled slightly while descending the palace steps, Daniel steadied her again. This time, she did not freeze. She allowed his hand to remain on her arm until she regained her balance. For the first time, her lips formed a quiet word of thanks. To Daniel, these moments felt small, but he knew they were not. For a queen who had flinched from every touch since the war, each step forward was a victory. But not everyone saw it that way. Some counselors whispered of weakness. They claimed the queen was being manipulated by a human soldier, a simple man with no knowledge of their history. Others argued that perhaps the bond was a sign, something greater than tradition. The debates grew louder behind closed doors. And though Lyra did not speak of it, Daniel sensed the storm forming around them. One night, as he prepared to leave her chamber, she called his name softly. "Daniel." He turned. "Yes, Majesty." Her voice lowered, almost uncertain. "When you stand near me, the silence does not hurt as much. I do not understand why." Daniel hesitated, then gave a small smile. "Maybe because you're not truly alone." Her eyes lingered on him, and for a brief moment, the mask of a queen fell away, leaving only a woman who had carried too much pain. She gave the faintest nod, as if agreeing with words she could not yet say aloud. That night, Daniel walked back through the palace with a strange feeling in his chest. He had not come to Veara expecting to be noticed, let alone to become someone important in the queen's life. Yet now, in some unexplainable way, he was. The days continued, and the trust between them grew, but so did the unease among those who watched. And in the shadows of the palace, enemies began to stir, whispering that the queen's weakness could soon be turned against her. For the first time since the war, the queen was no longer hiding completely in silence. She was reaching out, fragile and cautious, and it was to a human soldier that she extended her hand. That fragile trust would soon be tested in ways neither of them expected.